Okay, I'm gonna dive right in. So, already so many teams, multiply that by the number of staff, coaches, players, etc. How and when do you decide which stories you're gonna narrow in on?
Yeah, it's a process. You you sort of look at all those things, every team, every league, the players within it, and we try and do as much research as we can to figure out. But you just come down to it. You just have to start making choices, and you have to just follow your instinct and your gut about character, team, story, and and cross your fingers that you kind of get it right. And if it looks like you haven't got it right, you've got to be quite quick on your toes to try and pivot and find the interesting story. But I think having done a lot of these shows, I think we as a company have a pretty good instinct for what can work and what can't. And also what I think we're always looking for is like, okay, what stories here can exist in what stories could exist irregardless of what
Hmm.
happens on the soccer field or irregardless of what happens, on the day-to-day game. And I think if you can keep that kind of focus, then and always trust your judgment slightly, then it's a better way than constantly chasing your tail because this team won or that player scored or whatever it is.
Yeah, so with something like Onside, did you have to take into account, I want to call it like an educational component? Because obviously, soccer, football, globally, hugely well known, but it's a growing sport in the country that this league takes place in. So, like, what was that conversation like?
I think a little bit. I mean, probably not to the extent that we did on Drive to Survive or we did on some of the other shows. Because I think that even though the US is not necessarily been a huge hotbed of soccer, I still think soccer as a global sport has enough kind of ubiquity about it that you don't have to go, hey, there's a ball and people kick it and there's two goals and it goes through that. I think people are probably more familiar with soccer than most sports. Whereas with Formula One, especially in those first few episodes, we were sort of presuming that a huge chunk of our audience would have never have not only never have experienced the race, but probably have no idea anything about the sport. So there was much more education on something like that than perhaps there is on something like this.
You've got a player like Messi in the league, right? Who, like, even if, it's a growing sport here, internationally well known, what, is there a temptation to focus on him? Or is it like, no, we want to make sure that everyone else's stories are told in balance? But obviously, given the season that was had, like, he is a player in this.
I think it's a good question. I think our instinct was, there'd been a couple of documentaries that Apple had done around Messi and his introduction to the league and then around his World Cup. And I think we took the view that we wanted to, the strength of this series we felt was going to be in showcasing the league was bigger than just one player at one team. And and by the way, if you want to go and learn more about that player, great. And there's a lot of documentaries that you can kind of go and watch. And I think we felt like we didn't want to go over kind of old ground with Messi. His arrival in the league had been well documented. His impact on the world stage, pretty much everyone knew. So I think we took the view of like, look, if Miami go on and win the MLS Cup, then probably he'll be in it more than we would have expected. And I think we obviously featured them in the first game into Miami because that was a statement about themes, bigger themes in the league. It was about LA Galaxy, kind of this the most storied club in MLS history, but going down a slightly different path into Miami, the new upstarts, bringing in the best player in the world, filling it with kind of these Barcelona legends and hoping that would work for them. And we felt that was a great place to start because it also told you something bigger about the league. And that's what we tried to follow. We wanted to find stories that were interesting, but also thematically explored some of the other bigger things. And I'm pleased that we were able to do that. I'm pleased that there wasn't that temptation of like, okay, we better get on a flight to Miami tomorrow and get some more Messi because I don't think these stories are going to sustain. I think they did, and I think that's great.